It was a cold October morning when the wind seemed to whisper names I hadn't heard in years. Maple Grove Cemetery was shrouded in a light mist, the kind that seems to hide more than it reveals. I held a small bouquet of white lilies, my wife Helen's favorite flowers. It had been exactly 11 years since the day I buried her there, under that same oak tree that now bent wearily. And yet, every time I stepped onto that damp ground, I felt as if time had stopped at the exact moment the coffin was lowered and my heart broke in two. I always thought that pain lessened with time. People say that, don't they? Time heals all wounds. But anyone who has lost the love of their life knows that this is a lie told with good intentions. Time doesn't heal. It only teaches you to live with the emptiness. I had learned to smile at dinners, to talk to neighbors, to pretend everything was normal. But every night, before going to sleep, I would still look at the pillow beside me and imagine the scent of her perfume. It was like a silent ritual of longing and guilt. Before continuing, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all His infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, because we can never lose faith in God, for He will never abandon us, because His love is eternal and infinite. I also take this opportunity to ask you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps me a lot, thank you. Now, allow me to tell you what happened that day, because what I found at Helen's grave completely changed everything I believed about life, and about death. That morning, I felt something different. There was a kind of silence that wasn't peace, it was expectation. As if the very air awaited some revelation. I walked slowly among the tombstones until I spotted, in the distance, the white cross with the name, Helen Miller. The same name I repeated in my prayers every night. But there was something strange there. A movement, two silhouettes. At first I thought it was some gardener, or perhaps someone lost. But as I approached, I realized they were two women. They were sitting right next to the grave, wrapped in worn blankets, their faces marked by life on the streets. One of them, the older one, had a distant look, like someone carrying too many memories to fit in her chest. The other, younger one, held something in her hands, an aged envelope, yellowed with age. When they saw me, they stood up hurriedly, somewhat frightened, as if I were someone they shouldn't encounter. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to hide my irritation and astonishment. After all, Helen's grave was a sacred place to me. They looked at each other, and the older one, her voice trembling, replied, "Actually, sir, it's you who can help us." That sentence struck me. How did they know who I was? And what were they doing there, at my wife's grave? The younger woman held out the envelope. This was from Mrs. Helen," she said, almost whispering. "She asked us to keep it, and give it to you when the time was right." My body froze. I couldn't breathe properly. The envelope really did have Helen's handwriting. I would recognize those smooth curves anywhere. But how was this possible? Helen died 11 years ago, and I collected every single one of her things. There wasn't a single letter left for me. I held the paper with trembling hands. I felt its weight, not the weight of the envelope itself, but the mystery it carried. My heart pounded, and part of me wanted to tear it open right then and there, to find out what was inside. But another part feared what I might find. What if it was a farewell I wasn't ready to read? What if it was something she never wanted me to know? "Who are you?" I asked, trying to contain my emotion. The older woman, who had remained silent until then, looked at me and answered with a calmness that disarmed me, "My name is Martha. And this is Evelyn. Your wife saved us many years ago." I was paralyzed. Helen, saving people, and I never knew. It sounded like a parallel story of the woman I thought I knew so well. I remembered when Helen used to spend afternoons at the church shelter. She said she liked to talk to forgotten souls. I never paid much attention to it, thinking it was just a pastime. But now, seeing those two women, something told me there was much more behind those visits. The wind picked up, lifting dry leaves around us. It was as if autumn itself wanted to witness that moment. Martha continued. "She said that when the time came, we would find you here, and that this letter would bring peace to us all." I looked at the envelope and saw, written in Helen's delicate handwriting, something that made me shudder, "For Evelyn Parker, delivered by George, God willing." My name was there. How could she have known I would be in that place on that day? And who was Evelyn Parker? I looked at the young woman beside me, who lowered her eyes and began to cry silently. Those tears seemed to carry years of regret. "She promised me that one day you would understand," Evelyn said between sobs. "But first, you need to know what happened." I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. A chill ran down my spine. And in that instant, I realized that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same after that. As I watched the two women before me, I felt something in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. Faith and fear mixed together. It was as if God had prepared that encounter from the beginning, as part of a plan that I, with all my human stubbornness, would never understand on my own. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was hold the envelope against my chest, like someone holding their heart to keep it from escaping. The rain began to fall lightly, and for a moment, the sound of the drops mingled with my own stifled sobs. "Helen, what did you want to tell me?" As I knelt before the grave, Evelyn placed a hand on my shoulder. "The letter isn't for you," she said firmly, despite her tears. "It's for me." And it was at that exact moment that the world seemed to spin in slow motion. I felt the air escape my lungs, as if I'd been struck by an invisible blow. "Wasn't the letter for me? Then why did Helen write my name on the envelope? Why did she want me to be the bearer of this message?" Evelyn's gaze met mine, and I saw something familiar there. A glimmer, a gesture, almost like Helen's when she tried to hide her pain. That's when everything started to make a strange sense, but I still wasn't ready to accept it. Martha took a small, worn silver crucifix from her pocket and placed it in my hands. "She said to give it to me with the letter. She said you would understand." I looked at the cross, and on the back was engraved something, almost faded, "With eternal love, H." My heart skipped a beat. Helen always signed with an H. It was our little secret. Every note, every letter, even the shopping list entries. I knew, in that instant, that it was all real. But there was something more. Something that hung in the air like an ancient secret about to be revealed. And when Evelyn looked up, wiping away her tears, she said something that would change my life forever. "George, before she died, Helen told me who I really am." And in that exact second, I felt that the autumn chill wasn't coming from the wind, it was coming from the truth about to be born. The name Evelyn kept echoing in my head, like a distant bell that wouldn't stop ringing. That young woman, simply dressed and with teary eyes, stared at me with a mixture of shame and need. I was still trying to understand what she meant by that, and, above all, what Helen had to do with all of this. The tomb, the envelope, the crucifix. Everything seemed to be part of something much bigger than a simple coincidence. The wind picked up, and the rain, which had been gentle, began to intensify. I offered the two women shelter inside my car, parked a few meters away. They hesitated for a few seconds, until Martha, the older one, gave Evelyn a little push. "Go on, girl. He won't hurt you." I got into the car first, to show they could trust me. I just wanted to understand. I needed to understand. The car's interior fell silent. The rain beat against the window in an almost hypnotic rhythm. Evelyn held the envelope against her chest, as if it were something sacred. "You said you met my wife," I began, trying to remain calm. "Where and how did that happen?" She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and replied, "It was many years ago, long before she got sick. I was living on the streets of Dayton. I had lost everything, family, home, faith. One day, a woman showed up at the shelter where I was sleeping. She brought hot soup, blankets, and an old Bible. She looked me in the eyes and said, 'You can still be saved.'" Evelyn paused and swallowed hard. That woman was Mrs. Helen. I leaned on the steering wheel, trying to process it all. Helen never told me this. Never mentioned Evelyn, or any similar story. But I could imagine. She had a heart that couldn't fit in her chest. She was always the kind of person who saw value in the souls the world discarded. I remembered her saying, "George, sometimes God speaks louder on the street corners of despair than in the pews of a church." "And you two became friends?" I asked. Evelyn smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I don't know if I can call it friendship. She was more like a temporary angel. She spent a few weeks helping at the shelter. Then, she disappeared." Her voice wavered. "But before she left, She gave me this letter. She said I should only open it when the time was right, and that you would be the one to deliver it. I felt a shiver run through my entire body. She said that. Evelyn nodded, staring intently at me. Yes. And she said more. She said that when you appeared, I should trust. That you carried something I had lost. Faith. Her words hit me hard. I, who for years had questioned God's presence, was seen by my late wife as someone who still had faith. What a bitter irony! Martha, who had been silent until then, cleared her throat. Helen didn't just help Evelyn. She helped me too. She held out her hands, showing a scar on her wrist. When I tried to end my life, she was the one who held me back. She told me that God still had a plan. She closed her eyes and let out a sob. Since then, I've waited for the day that envelope would bring some kind of answer. For a moment, the car seemed too small to contain so much of the past. The sound of the rain, the damp smell, the heavy sighs, everything created an almost sacred atmosphere, as if that moment were a confession before heaven itself. And you never opened the letter? I asked Evelyn. She shook her head. No. I promised Helen I would wait. And when Martha and I started sleeping here near the cemetery, I felt the moment was coming. The way she said it gave me chills. It was as if Helen had truly guided their every step to that exact point. I opened the glove compartment and took out a tissue, offering it to Evelyn. Would you like to read it now? I asked. But she hesitated. I don't know if I can. I'm afraid of what's written. The fear in her eyes was the same fear I had felt so many times since Helen left. Fear of facing the truth. Fear of reopening wounds that never healed. Perhaps we should read it together, I suggested. Helen wanted us to be here. Maybe that's what she planned. Evelyn bit her lower lip and nodded slowly. The sound of the paper being opened was almost ceremonial. I held my breath as she ran her trembling fingers over the yellowed edges of the letter. The first lines were blurry, but Helen's smooth handwriting was unmistakable. Evelyn began to read softly. Dear Evelyn, if you are reading this, it is because God has fulfilled His timing. I know you are suffering, but I want you to know that forgiveness is the bridge that leads the soul back home. Evelyn's voice began to falter. She looked at me and continued, One day, you'll meet someone who carries my love, and that someone will show you that the past can be redeemed. Don't run from it. It needs to heal its own wounds too. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Helen was talking about me. I stood motionless, staring at those lines as if witnessing a miracle materialize. Helen knew. She knew that one day I would return there, that I would find Evelyn, and that this letter would be the link between the past and the future. It was as if she had written beyond life, guided by something divine. Evelyn stopped reading and cried. Martha held her hand, and I, not knowing what to do, simply closed my eyes. Silently, I murmured a prayer. I asked God to give me understanding, to show me the purpose behind it all. When I opened my eyes, I realized Evelyn was staring at the crucifix I was still holding. That crucifix, it's just like the one my mother used to wear. The sentence was spoken almost silently, but each syllable hit me like thunder. Your mother? I asked, confused. Yes, but she disappeared when I was little. I never saw her again. I looked at the crucifix, then at Evelyn's face. An old memory surfaced, Helen showing me an identical necklace, saying it had belonged to a lost sister, separated in childhood. She used to say that one day God would bring that person back, I murmured, my voice choked with emotion. Evelyn looked up, and I saw something change there. A flash of recognition, of astonishment, of truth. She was my sister. The question hung in the air like a sacred echo. I didn't know what to answer. Martha placed her hand on Evelyn's shoulder. Helen spoke a lot about a little sister she wanted to see again. Evelyn began to sob, and the rain seemed to match the rhythm of her pain. All I could do was watch, my heart torn between sadness and hope. Suddenly, I noticed something on the back of the letter. A small, almost invisible symbol, a cross drawn in blue ink and a word written in delicate letters, family. I knew, at that moment, that Helen had planned that reunion as a final act of love. That letter wasn't just a farewell. It was a call for reconciliation. A reminder that, even on the other side, Helen was still fulfilling her mission. I closed my eyes and felt a warm tear slide down my cheek. But before we could say anything, the sound of a loud bang on the window startled me. An unknown man was outside, his face covered by the rain and with a knowing look. He pointed to the still open envelope and said, "That letter should never have been read." My heart froze in my chest. Evelyn's eyes widened. Martha held my hand. And in that instant, I realized that Helen's story was far from over. The sound of that knock on the window almost stopped my heart. The rain was falling heavily, but the man's gaze was even more piercing. He seemed to know something we didn't, something Helen had somehow kept hidden until that moment. "That letter should never have been read," he repeated, and with each word I felt the air temperature plummet inside the car. For a moment, no one said anything. Evelyn was trembling. Martha put her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back tears. I impulsively opened the door. The icy water hit me like a shock of reality. "Who are you?" I asked, shouting over the sound of the rain. He stared at me for long seconds before answering. "My name is Samuel. I worked with your wife." That made me freeze. Helen never mentioned any Samuel. I tried to remember every name, every face, every hospital visit in the final months of her illness, and nothing. "Where did she work with me?" I asked. He hesitated, took a deep breath, and replied, "At the Dayton shelter. We volunteered together. I knew about the letter, but it wasn't meant to be opened." "Not yet." Those words left me confused and furious at the same time. "What do you mean, it wasn't supposed to be opened? Helen has been dead for 11 years. If not now, when would be the right time?" Samuel lowered his head, and I saw that he was holding another envelope, smaller, crumpled, as if it had been kept for years. "Because there's more than one letter, Mr. Miller. And the second one is for you." My whole body shuddered. I stared at him, unsure what to say. He handed me the envelope, and for a moment, I considered refusing it. I no longer knew if I wanted any more answers. Sometimes, ignorance is a kind of refuge. But something inside me, perhaps Helen's voice, pushed me to accept. I took the envelope with trembling hands. "Why now?" I asked, feeling my throat tighten. Samuel looked away. "Because God's timing is different from ours. She asked me to wait until the day Evelyn and Martha met here with you. She said that when that happened, the cycle would be complete." I sat back down in the car, trying to catch my breath. Evelyn stared at me with wide eyes, and Martha just murmured a quiet prayer, as if fearing what was to come. The sound of the rain seemed increasingly distant, and the silence inside the car was almost supernatural. I carefully opened the envelope. The paper was fragile, yellowed. The handwriting was the same, firm, delicate, unmistakable. I read the first line and felt my stomach churn. "My beloved George, if you are reading this, it is because you have finally found what you lost." My hands began to sweat. I continued, "I left this world before I could tell you something I've kept in my heart. I made choices that have haunted me for years. And now I need you to forgive, not for me but for you." I trembled. Helen, my Helen, was speaking to me again, and each word seemed to pierce through time. I continued reading, trying to control my tears. "You always believed that our love was the purest story that destiny wrote. But the truth, George, is that it was born from something you don't yet know." I paused, feeling my throat burn. I looked at Samuel, but he looked away, as if he already knew what was coming. Helen continued, "Before I met you, I searched for someone I believed could help me find my lost sister. Her name was Evelyn Parker. I didn't know that one day she would cross our paths again." I looked at Evelyn, who was now crying silently. "George," she whispered, "she knew all along." I nodded, unable to say anything. Helen had always known, and somehow she had orchestrated all of this to happen now. I continued reading, even more slowly. "When I found out Evelyn was alive, I was already sick. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to see me as a woman torn between two families. But God showed me that love doesn't divide, it multiplies." Those words disarmed me. It was so typical of Helen to see beauty even in wounds. "I left a promise. that one day the three of you would meet. Because Evelyn carries the part of my story you never knew, and Martha, my faith when I no longer had the strength. I closed my eyes, letting the tears flow. Helen's voice, even in letters on the paper, seemed alive. It seemed like she was there, beside me, embracing me. George, forgive me for not telling you. I didn't hide it out of shame, but out of love. I wanted to spare you the weight of the pain I carried. Now it's your turn to free that love and transform it into something greater. I was trembling. Evelyn took my hand, and I felt the human warmth I had missed for so long. Martha, with the crucifix between her fingers, whispered, "She knew. She always knew." "There's more," Samuel said, pointing to the bottom of the letter. There was something written in a different handwriting, not Helen's, but a priest's. "Delivery made as promised. The time has come." I looked at him. "You were part of this too." He nodded, moved. "Helen asked me to keep this letter. She said that when you were ready, I would know. And now I know." Silence returned. This time, a silence full of meaning. A silence that didn't hurt, it only weighed heavily, like a divine revelation. I looked at those two women and realized, what bound me to them wasn't chance. It was Helen's love weaving destinies together. Evelyn took a deep breath and said, "There's something you need to see." She opened a small, torn bag and pulled out an old, faded photograph. It was Helen, still young, with a baby in her arms, and behind her, a woman I had never seen before. "This photo was taken at the shelter," Evelyn explained. "The woman next to her, she's my mother." My breath caught in my throat. Helen had met Evelyn's mother before she even met me. Everything was interconnected. It was as if the pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place. "She didn't tell you because she wanted to protect you," Evelyn continued. "She said the past was too heavy." I held the photo, running my fingers over Helen's face, and felt a mixture of pain and gratitude. "She tried to fix everything, even after she was gone," I murmured. Samuel approached the window and looked at the sky. "She believed that redemption happens when love is shared. She said that you would find forgiveness by helping someone who mirrored you." I looked at Evelyn and Martha, and I understood. Helen didn't just want me to find them. She wanted me to save them, just as she had saved me years ago. The sound of the rain began to subside. The air felt lighter, almost clean. I knew that moment was sacred. Everything I had lived through, all the losses, all the nights I spent asking for answers, had brought me to this moment. But before I could say anything, the distant sound of a siren cut through the silence. Samuel looked back, his face pale. "They found us," he said, terrified. "We need to go. Now." "Who found us?" I asked, confused. But he was already running towards the cemetery gate, the rain returning to fall like a curtain of mystery between us. Evelyn and Martha exchanged glances, and fear once again gripped the car. I looked at Helen's letter again. On the back, something I hadn't noticed before, a phrase in small print, almost erased by the dampness. "If love is true, it will always be pursued. Protect them." I closed my eyes. And in that instant, I realized that what Helen had left for me was not just a message. It was a mission. The rain was falling so hard it seemed to want to extinguish the world. The sound of thunder echoed through the trees, and Samuel ran towards the cemetery gate, disappearing into the mist like a shadow. I was still sitting in the car, breathless, with Helen's letter clutched between my fingers. Evelyn was crying softly, and Martha was praying, asking for protection. I didn't know what to fear more, what we had discovered, or what was yet to come. The distant sound of the siren drew closer, cutting through the early morning with a metallic blare. Evelyn looked at me, startled. "He said they found us. Who are they?" I had no answer. All he knew was that something about Samuel inspired both confidence and danger. "Lock the doors," I murmured. And we did, as if that fragile metal barrier could protect us from whatever it was. The red light flashed in the rearview mirror, and a dark car appeared in the distance, coming down the dirt road that led to the main gate. Two headlights cut through the rain like furious eyes. "Maybe they're police," Martha said, but doubt trembled in her voice. I knew it wasn't the police. This was something else. Something Helen, somehow, had already expected. I picked up the crucifix again and held it against my chest. At that moment, it wasn't just a reminder of her, it was a shield. "Lord, give me strength," I whispered. Evelyn wiped her face and held my hand. "What did the letter say at the end?" she asked. I looked at her and replied, my voice trembling, "It told me to protect you." The traffic light was approaching too fast. And then, without warning, Samuel reappeared. He banged on the car window and shouted, "Get out of here! Now!" Panic gripped the car. I started the engine, but it didn't respond. I turned the key again. Nothing. Evelyn began to cry, and Martha clutched a rosary between her fingers, murmuring the Lord's Prayer. That's when I heard the first bang. A gunshot. The rear window shattered, and the dry sound of the impact made my body react before my mind. I lowered their heads and threw myself on top of them. Another shot. The sound echoed among the tombstones. That cemetery, once sacred, was now the scene of something diabolical. Why? I thought. Why does someone want to stop us from knowing the truth about Helen? Samuel was running in a zigzag pattern, yelling for me to get out of there. "There's another car behind us," he shouted. I couldn't see anything but shadows and lightning. The world seemed to be in slow motion. I gripped the cross tightly and tried to start the car again. The engine sputtered, and then started. It was a miracle. I floored the accelerator, the car skidded in the mud and started moving. Samuel banged on the hood. "Go to church." Helen said it would be the only safe place. I yelled back, "And you?" He smiled sadly. "My part ends here." The car started moving, and when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw Samuel fall to his knees, the red lights engulfing him. Evelyn screamed, but I knew we couldn't go back. Instinct told me to keep going. Helen had planned everything, including that fate. I drove aimlessly, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, my heart racing. Evelyn was sobbing in the back seat. "Why would anyone shoot us, George? What do they want?" I didn't know. But deep down, something told me that those letters weren't just messages. They were secrets that someone didn't want to come to light. When we finally arrived at the small chapel by the road, the rain subsided. The bell rang on its own, without any wind. I parked the car and got out, still trembling. The silence there was too heavy. I pushed the door open, and the creaking echoed like a scream. The altar candles were lit, and an open Bible on the pulpit seemed to be waiting for us. Evelyn walked to the altar. "She's been here before," she said, almost in a whisper. This was the church where she did her volunteer work. Martha knelt, weeping silently. I just stood there, trying to understand what Helen was asking of me now. On the altar, there was a small wooden box, with the same blue cross symbol drawn on it as on the letters. My heart raced. "Helen, what have you left for me now?" I murmured. I carefully opened the box. Inside was another letter, but this one was sealed with red wax and bore an inscription, "For when the truth becomes unbearable." My hands were trembling. Should I open it? Evelyn shook her head. She must have left instructions. I picked up the letter, sat in the first pew of the church, and stared at that seal. It was as if it pulsed. I knew that, from that point on, there would be no turning back. "George," Martha said, "sometimes God only shows us what we can bear. Perhaps it's not the right time." I listened, but my heart said otherwise. Helen had prepared every step. That letter was the continuation of everything. I took a deep breath and broke the seal. Inside there was only a sheet of paper, and a photo. The sheet bore a handwritten phrase, "Not all angels have wings, some fall." Below the phrase, the name Samuel. My blood ran cold. I picked up the photo. It was Helen, embracing Samuel, inside a shelter. She was smiling. He was too. But there was something in that look that made me shudder. A look of love. My God! Evelyn saw the image and recoiled. "George, what does this mean?" I couldn't answer. Everything was spinning. My head throbbed. Helen and Samuel. Helen and that man who had just saved us. She trusted him, or loved him. Suddenly, the church bell rang. Once, twice, 3 times. No one had touched it. The candles flickered, and one of the windows opened in the wind. The letter flew from my hands and landed on the open Bible on the altar. I ran over there. The verse where she had stopped said, "And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." John 8 verse 32. I felt the tears welling up. Helen was guiding me, even through the pain. But before I could think, a loud noise came from the back of the church. Footsteps. Evelyn and Martha flinched. I picked up the crucifix and walked slowly to the side door. The sound drew closer. Heavy breathing. And then, the door burst open, and a deep voice echoed in the dim light. "Mr. Miller, it's time to find out who your wife really was." A chill ran down my spine. And in that instant, I realized that Helen's true secret had not yet begun to be revealed. The sound of that voice filled the church like thunder trapped between the walls. I turned quickly, the crucifix still firmly in my hands, and saw a man standing in the shadow of the side door. Tall, in a soaked overcoat and dark hat, he looked more like a memory someone had forgotten to erase. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to control the tremor in my voice. He took 2 steps forward. "I am someone who should have been buried with her." Evelyn held her breath. Martha gripped my arm. The candlelight flickered, casting uneasy shadows on the walls. "Buried with whom?" I asked, my heart racing. He glanced at the crucifix I held, a bitter smile spreading across his face. "With Helen." Those words hit me like a blow. The man took off his hat, revealing his face. And that's when the world seemed to stop. It was Samuel. But not the same man I had seen running in the cemetery minutes before. He was clean-shaven, with a different expression, his gaze firm and lucid. "You," I murmured. "I saw you out there, running." He interrupted me. "What you saw was part of the story. The part Helen wanted you to see." I felt the ground spin beneath my feet. "Are you saying this was all staged?" Samuel gave a slight smile. "No. It was planned. By her." Evelyn took a step forward. "What's going on? Why would Helen do something like this?" He looked at us and replied in a low voice, because she knew that the heaviest sin she carried wasn't the cancer, it was the secret that destroyed 2 families. Martha put her hand to her mouth. I approached, astonished. "What are you talking about?" Samuel looked at me firmly and said, "Helen didn't just die as your wife, George. She died as mine too." The silence that followed was almost physical. The sound of the rain, the creaking of the woodwork, the wind cutting through the cracks in the windows, everything seemed to vanish. I felt my legs weaken. "That's a lie." He shook his head. "I wish it were." Evelyn began to cry. "Are you saying you were married to her too?" Samuel nodded, opening his coat. Inside, a plastic envelope. Marriage certificate. Helen Parker and Samuel Reed. Dated 19 years ago. My hands trembled. I picked up the paper and stared at it as one stares at a ghost. Her name was there, the unmistakable signature. "But we were married for 21 years, I murmured. "Then how?" He finished for me, "Because she never annulled the first one." The sound of thunder broke the silence. Evelyn sobbed, murmuring, "It can't be true. She loved you, George. She talked to me about you." Samuel looked at her and replied, "And she talked to me about him." Her love wasn't divided. It was confused. She believed she was fulfilling a divine mission, uniting 2 lost men. My chest burned. Each memory now seemed like a different shadow. Her smile, the days in the hospital, the promises whispered at night. Everything mingled with an indescribable pain. "So why did you come here?" "To destroy what's left of her," I asked. Samuel took a deep breath. "No. I came to set you free." He placed another envelope on the altar. "This is the last letter. The one she left with me." I walked over hesitantly. My hands were sweating, but I opened it anyway. Inside, just 1 page and Helen's necklace, the original one, not the one I kept. The paper bore a single sentence, "Truth is also love, even when it hurts." Evelyn collapsed onto the bench, sobbing loudly. Martha tried to comfort her. I could only stare at that necklace, remembering every time I saw it sway around Helen's neck, reflecting the sunlight. Everything inside me screamed that this was a nightmare. But my heart knew, It was real. Samuel approached slowly. She asked me to protect you, George. She said that when she found out everything, she would try to blame herself. But it's not your fault. None of us knew the magnitude of the plan God was writing. I stared at him, almost breathless. And what is that plan, anyway? He pointed to Evelyn. Her. She's the link between the three of us. Evelyn lifted her face, her gaze lost. Me. But I'm not your daughter. Samuel shook his head hesitantly. No, Evelyn. You're only her daughter. The words echoed through the church nave. I took a step back, as if the ground had disappeared beneath me. No, that's not possible. Samuel took a deep breath. Helen had a daughter before she met you, George. And she asked me never to look for her. She said God would take care of it. But he brought you to her. Evelyn sobbed, covering her face with her hands. My mother. It was her all along. I approached, knelt beside her. She loved you, Evelyn. Never doubt that. And even saying that, a part of me knew, Helen had deceived us, but she had also brought us together. Samuel walked to the altar, knelt, and began to pray. I watched him in silence. For a moment, it seemed that the hatred and confusion dissolved into something greater, a bitter understanding that, even in her error, Helen sought redemption. The sound of footsteps outside interrupted everything. Lights flickered again through the stained-glass windows. Evelyn looked at me, startled. They're back. I nodded. Probably. Samuel stood up firmly. Then it's time to do what Helen asked. And what did she ask for? I asked. He looked at the cross above the altar. That the truth be told, even if it cost us everything. The church's front door began to open slowly, creaking like a warning. The light from the headlights flooded the hallway. I clutched the crucifix and the letter, feeling the weight of destiny drawing near. And when the first shadow crossed the threshold of the church, I realized, for the first time, that Helen had left behind not just a love story. She had left behind a spiritual war. The door opened slowly, and the sound of the wind sent a shiver down my spine. The figure that entered was that of a woman, tall, thin, her face partially covered by a dark scarf. I could barely make out her features, but there was something in the way she walked, a strange serenity, as if the chaos outside didn't exist. Samuel stared at her in astonishment. Evelyn stood motionless, her eyes brimming with tears. Who is she? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Samuel answered before she could approach, someone who also bears the name Helen. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. The woman slowly removed the handkerchief. Her face was wrinkled, her gaze deep, a smile that seemed to know every wound of the soul. Not Helen, she corrected softly. My name is Helena Parker. I was Helen's mother. The ground seemed to disappear beneath my feet. Helen's mother was dead, or at least, that's what everyone believed. But that's impossible, I murmured. She approached the altar, touching the crucifix as if rediscovering an old memory. Nothing is impossible when God wants the truth to come to light. Evelyn ran to her, stunned. You are my grandmother. The woman smiled and stroked her granddaughter's face. I am, my love. And you are the reason I came back. Tears streamed down Evelyn's face like a silent confession. Samuel fell to his knees, murmuring something like a prayer of astonishment. Helena looked at me intently. George, Helen told me about you. She said that, even after everything, your heart would be the only one capable of listening without hating. Those words hit me hard. I wanted to believe I was strong enough, but part of me was crumbling. Why did she do that? I asked. Why hide the fact that I had another family, another life? Helena took a deep breath, and her voice was serene, but full of pain. Because love, when born amidst guilt, tries to save what remains, even if it needs to hide. Samuel looked up. She tried to bring us together, didn't she? Helena nodded. Yes. Helen believed that the past needed to be redeemed by uniting those who had suffered because of it. She walked to the bench where Evelyn was crying and placed her hand on her head. She wanted you to be free from the pain that separated us. Helena's words brought back memories I didn't know I had. Flashbacks surfaced in my mind. Helen, in the hospital, looking out the window, murmuring about forgiveness, about a reunion I didn't understand. Now, everything made sense. Helena turned to me. "George, my daughter loved you deeply. But she carried an old burden, a secret that began long before you came along." She pulled a small diary from inside her coat, tied with a worn ribbon. "This diary tells everything. The story of how her faith was born, and how it was betrayed." I picked up the diary with trembling hands. The smell of old paper and wax mingled with the incense of the candles. I opened it to the first page, and Helen's handwriting jumped out at me. "Mom, if one day I can't come back, tell him who I really was." I closed the diary immediately. I wasn't ready yet. Helena noticed. She knew this moment would be the hardest. But she also knew that the pain of truth is the first step toward healing. Evelyn stood up, wiping away her tears. "So please tell me. I want to know who she was." Helena approached the altar, looked at the crucifix, and began, "Before the letters were born, before the cancer, before the love between you." Helen was a young woman full of faith, but also of fear. She fell in love with a forbidden man. "Forbidden?" I asked. Helena nodded. "A priest." Silence filled the church. His name was Father Michael Reed, Samuel's father. My heart raced. Evelyn covered her mouth, and Samuel simply collapsed to the floor, powerless. Helena continued, "Helen met Michael when she started working at the parish. He helped her when she lost her little sister as a child. But that comfort turned into something more, something that shouldn't exist." The old woman closed her eyes. "When they found out, he was expelled from the church. And she, helpless, became pregnant with Evelyn. I took her away, hid everything. Later, she tried to start over in Ohio, and that's where she met you, George. She thought the past was buried, but the old sin never stayed quiet." Samuel lifted his face, his eyes brimming with tears. "So Helen and my father," Helena nodded. "Yes, my son. You were united by the same blood of guilt and redemption." Evelyn was crying, and I just felt an unbearable weight in my chest. Everything I believed about Helen, her purity, her devotion, her unwavering love, now seemed stained by a silent tragedy. But at the same time, a voice inside me said, "She only tried to love as she knew how." "Why reveal this now?" I asked, my voice trembling. Helena looked at me and replied, "Because Helen told me that when forgiveness finally meets truth, the curse will end." "A curse?" I asked, confused. Helena nodded. "Every generation in our family has lost someone to despair." Helen believed that love and faith could break that cycle. The candles began to flicker, and a cold wind swept through the church. Helena looked at the altar, as if she sensed someone's presence. "She's here," she murmured. "Your daughter feels it." Evelyn knelt, weeping. "Mom, I forgive you." The candles settled, and a soft scent of lilies filled the air. It was Helen's scent. My heart raced. I knew it was impossible, but at the same time, undeniable. Helena smiled, her eyes welling with tears. She heard. Now the truth has been told. I looked around, and for the first time since it all began, I felt a light, almost imperceptible peace. But before anyone could say anything more, a loud bang shook the windows. The sound of screeching tires and headlights flashing through the glass filled the temple. Several men got out of a black car, armed and wearing suits. Samuel ran to the front of the church. "They came for us," Evelyn shouted. Helena turned to me, firm. "George, take them to the sacristy basement." "No." I ran, pulling Evelyn and Martha along. The sound of footsteps drew closer. Voices echoed outside. Helena stood, looking at the crucifix, and murmured something I will never forget. "Lord, do not let my daughter's blood be in vain." When I closed the door behind us, the sound of the first shots echoed through the nave of the church. The smell of gunpowder mingled with that of candles and tears. And as I descended the stairs, with Evelyn and Martha beside me, a single certainty burned within me. Helen's story was not yet over. The sound of gunfire reverberated off the stone walls, like echoes of the past demanding their due in the present. I descended the sacristy stairs with Evelyn and Martha clinging to my arms. The air in the basement was damp and heavy, smelling of old candles and rotting wood. We could hear Helena praying upstairs, between shots, with a courage only mothers possess. Deep down, I knew she was sacrificing herself for us. We reached the bottom of the basement. There was a small, barred window, covered in dust. Outside, only shadows and rain. Evelyn trembled, her eyes fixed on the stairs. "George, what if she dies up there?" she asked. I wanted to answer, but the words wouldn't come out. Martha knelt, holding the crucifix. "God does not abandon those who keep the truth." The sound ceased for a few seconds. The silence was worse than the gunshots. That's when we heard footsteps, slow, dragging, descending the stairs. My whole body tensed. "Stay behind me," I whispered. I grabbed an old iron bar leaning against the wall and braced myself. Shadows moved in the dim light. And then, a familiar voice echoed, "George, it's me." It was Samuel. Soaked, wounded, his face covered in blood. He limped, leaning against the wall. "They took her," he said with difficulty. "Helena!" Evelyn cried, but he raised his hand. "She's still alive. They want her as a bargaining chip." "Coin?" I asked. Samuel nodded, breathless. "There's something Helen left hidden, a document, proof. Something worth more than gold. They killed to get it." Martha approached. "Who are they?" Samuel took a deep breath. "Men from the foundation that funded the Dayton shelter. Powerful people. Helen discovered they were using the shelter to launder money and hide fake donations. When she threatened to report them, they tried to silence her." The revelation came as a shock. Everything made sense now. The letters, the fear, the hidden codes in her words. Helen wasn't just seeking forgiveness. She was seeking justice. And now, years later, the consequences had caught up with us. "They think I have the document," Samuel continued. "But she hid it here, in this church." I looked around, trying to imagine where. Every brick, every cross, seemed to hide a secret. Evelyn stood up, determined. "Then let's find it." We began searching blindly, pushing furniture, lifting floorboards. The wind outside picked up, as if the sky itself were in turmoil. After a few minutes, I heard a metallic sound, a different echo coming from beneath the stone altar. Samuel limped over, knelt down, and began to push one of the plates. With effort, it moved, revealing a small compartment. Inside, a dusty metal tube. He opened it. Inside was a roll of yellowed papers and an old photograph of Helen, smiling. "She really predicted everything," I murmured. I picked up the roll and unfolded it. It was receipts for illegal transactions, checks, names of politicians and businessmen. "My God, this destroys half the city." Samuel nodded. "And that's why they'll never stop." Suddenly, we heard a voice at the top of the stairs. "I found you." It was cold, masculine, and filled with rage. "One of the men from the foundation." Samuel tried to stand, but he staggered. "Run," he shouted. "I'll hold them off." "No, Samuel," Evelyn yelled. But he was already climbing the stairs with the iron bar I had dropped. The sound of the confrontation was immediate. Screams, footsteps, breaking glass. I pulled Evelyn and Martha to the other side of the basement, looking for another way out. Behind an old cabinet, we found a narrow, almost invisible door. I pushed it with my shoulder until it gave way. A dark corridor opened, leading to the back of the church. We ran without looking back, the sound of the fight still echoing. When we emerged on the other side, the cold morning wind enveloped us. The church bell began to ring on its own, as if Helena's own soul were urging haste. "Let's go back for him," Evelyn shouted, but I held her arm. "No. He's doing his part. If we stay, we all die." We ran down the dirt road, soaked and breathless. In the distance, the city lights flickered like unattainable promises. Behind us, the sound of a bang, and an explosion. The church. I turned in time to see the fire rise, engulfing the sky. Evelyn fell to her knees, screaming her mother's and Samuel's names. I knelt beside her, trying to restrain her, but the heat of the flames was suffocating. Martha prayed aloud, her crucifix raised. "Lord, welcome the righteous." As the smoke began to engulf everything, I realized the metal tube was still in my hands. Inside it, the last piece of the puzzle. Helen had sacrificed everything, including her own soul, to ensure this truth would be revealed. Evelyn looked at me, her eyes red. "Now what do we do, George?" I took a deep breath. "Now, we finish what she started." But before we could move, a familiar voice came from behind us. "So you really did find the document?" I turned slowly. In the middle of the road, illuminated by the flames, was a female silhouette. When the light touched her face, the blood ran cold in my veins. It was Helen. Or at least, someone identical to her. The church flame reflected on that woman's face, and for a moment, I didn't know if it was the heat of the fire or the miracle that burned within me. Her face was identical to Helen's. The same smile, the same tender and firm gaze I saw on her wedding day. Evelyn choked on a sob. "Mother!" I couldn't breathe. "No, it can't be." The woman stepped forward, the wind lifting her dark hair. "I'm Martha." The voice was different, deeper, weary. "But there's something you need to know before you hate me." The sentence landed like a stone. I stared at Martha, the same woman who had prayed with me in the car, the woman who claimed to be just a homeless person taken in by Helen. "What's going on?" I asked. She took a deep breath, her gaze lost among the flames of the church. "I wasn't just a friend of Helen's. I was the cause of everything." The silence seemed heavier than the fire. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice choked with emotion. "What do you mean, the cause of everything?" Martha looked at her, her eyes brimming with tears. "Because I was the one who handed Helen over to them." The world spun. The words hung in the air. I took a step forward, unable to contain the shock. "You, what?" Martha collapsed to her knees. "I was desperate, George. They promised to give me back my daughter. They said that if I told them where Helen hid the documents, I would get my girl back. I believed them." Evelyn wept silently, and the fire in the distance seemed to respond, crackling like applause from hell. Martha continued, "I met with them that night. I told them where she kept everything. But when I returned, it was too late. She was ill, and they had begun to watch her. It was the beginning of the end." My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it wanted to tear my chest apart. I didn't know what to feel: hate, pity, compassion. Helen had died believing a friend had betrayed her, and now the betrayer was there, asking for forgiveness. "She forgave me before she died," Martha whispered. "She held my hand in the hospital and said, 'You will still serve God the right way. Take care of mine.'" Evelyn knelt before her, weeping. "So that's why she chose you to keep the letter?" Martha nodded. She believed that true forgiveness is when the one who hurts you becomes part of the healing. Those words pierced my soul. Helen, even betrayed, had loved. Even wounded, she had trusted. And there was the proof. The woman who had betrayed her was now risking her own life for us. The sound of footsteps interrupted the moment. Behind us, a black pickup truck emerged from the road. Headlights on, engine roaring. "They're back," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. Martha stood up, taking a deep breath. "No, they never left. They were waiting for you to find what she hid." A man stepped out of the vehicle, the same one I had seen in the cemetery that morning, watching from a distance. His face was familiar, but I couldn't quite place where. He walked calmly toward us, his eyes fixed on me. "Mr. Miller," he said with a half-smile, "I see you found what you were looking for." "Who are you?" I asked firmly. He held up his leather badge. "Federal agent. Name: Cole Richardson. I worked with your wife." Martha took a step back. "Liar. You're not a cop." He smiled. "Depends on the day." The way he spoke left no doubt. That man was at the center of it all. "You deceived her," I accused. "You promised help and condemned her." He shrugged. "She condemned herself when she decided to keep the evidence instead of handing it over to us. You have no idea how big this is, Mr. Miller." Evelyn stepped between us. "She did the right thing." Cole shook his head. "Right. Your mother ruined the careers of some very dangerous men. Now you've become the problem." He pulled out his gun. "Hand over the pipe." Martha stepped forward. No, and in that instant, time seemed to stand still. The sound of the fire faded into the distance. The wind ceased. She took a step forward, extending her arms. If they want the pipe, they'll have to go through me. Cole smiled coldly. Then it will be so. The shot echoed in the void. Martha staggered backward, blood trickling down her chest. Evelyn screamed, and I rushed to help her. She looked at me, her eyes already misty. Tell Helen that I managed to serve God. Her body felt light in my arms. Evelyn was crying on her shoulder, and I felt despair rising like wildfire. Cole approached, still holding the gun. Last chance, Miller. The document. I gripped the tube tightly. Every fiber of my being screamed to protect Helen's legacy. Behind me, the road lit up in blue and red. Sirens. Police cars appearing out of nowhere. Cole looked back, surprised. No. The sound from the loudspeakers cut through the night. FBI! Drop the weapon. Cole recoiled, panic finally appearing on his face. Evelyn looked at me, confused. How did they find us? And that's when I saw it. In Martha's shirt pocket, a small device flashing blue. A tracker. She had called for help, even knowing she would die before seeing it arrive. The agents surrounded Cole, disarmed him, and threw him to the ground. I was still holding Martha, now motionless, her face serene, as if she had rediscovered the peace she had so desperately sought. One of the agents approached and took the tube from my hands. Mr. Miller, your wife was a hero. She saved many people. This evidence will bring down half the state. I just shook my head, tears streaming down my face uncontrollably. Evelyn held Martha's cold hand, murmuring a prayer. She redeemed herself, George. She kept her promise to Helen. I looked at her and nodded. Yes. And now it's our turn. As the officers put Cole in the car, I looked up at the smoke-filled sky. The church fire was still burning, but through the flames, I swear I saw, for an instant, Helen's smiling silhouette. And I knew, at that moment, that her story still had another hidden truth. The smoke from the church still cast silhouettes in the sky when the last FBI car disappeared down the road. The silence that followed was the kind that weighs on the heart. Evelyn and I stood there, watching the trail of red lights vanish into the darkness. Martha's body had already been taken away, but the bloodstain was still on the ground, dark as the memory of sin. I knew Helen had one, but at what price? Evelyn sat on the roadside, her face covered by her hands. Is it all over? She asked, her voice choked with emotion. I looked at the horizon and replied, when a woman's love is this great, nothing ends. It only changes form. And in that instant, the wind brought back that soft scent, lilies and rain, the same one Helen used to wear when she went out to pray. I picked up the necklace she had left in the letter and held it between my fingers. The cold metal seemed to pulse. Evelyn watched me in silence. She truly loved you, didn't she? She asked. I smiled sadly. With all her soul. And she still loves me. She nodded, and for a moment, the weight of the world seemed light. But the peace was short-lived. One of the agents had left me a sealed folder, the complete investigation report. When I opened it, I noticed something strange. Among the documents was a birth certificate, but the name in the mother field wasn't Helen Miller. It was Helen Reed, the same last name as Samuel. My blood ran cold. It can't be, I murmured. Evelyn came closer, trying to see. What is this? I showed her the paper. It's your birth certificate. Her eyes widened. But that's not my mother's name. I turned the pages. Among the entries was a handwritten note, in red ink, adopted in secrecy. File restricted by court order. Evelyn covered her mouth with her hands. Are you saying that Helen wasn't my mother? I took a deep breath, my heart pounding erratically. Or she raised you as someone else's daughter. Maybe, to hide who you really were. Evelyn looked at me, lost. Then who am I, George? Words seemed to want to tear me apart from the inside. I opened the smaller envelope that came with the folder. Inside, an old, faded photograph with two faces I immediately recognized. Helen and Helena, side by side, and in Helena's arms, a baby. On the back, handwritten, Evelyn Helena Parker, born Helena, raised by Helen. Evelyn fell to her knees. My mother. She wasn't my mother. She was my grandmother. I knelt with her, trying to comfort her. She raised you to protect you, Evelyn. If they had found out who you really were, they would have destroyed you along with her. Her sobs mingled with the wind. She lied to me my whole life. I held her face in my hands. She didn't lie. She saved you. Sometimes love disguises itself as silence. The sound of thunder ripped through the sky. The rain began again, as if the sky itself wanted to wash away the sins of that family. I looked at the dying flames in the distance. Everything Helen did was out of love, even if that love hurt. But then I noticed something even stranger. Inside the envelope there was also a loose note, in Helen's handwriting. George, if you've made it this far, know that Evelyn is the promise. Her blood holds the key to what still needs to be freed. Protect her, for there is one more truth the world is not ready to hear. My whole body shuddered. The key, I murmured. Evelyn looked at me. What key? I looked up, and suddenly I understood. Helen was talking about spiritual inheritance, but also literal inheritance. The document we had found in the metal tube spoke of properties, secret accounts, and donations destined for front foundations. I flipped through the papers until I found a familiar signature. Helena Parker. And right below it, another name, Evelyn Helena Parker, Universal Heiress. I looked at Evelyn. You own everything. She shook her head in disbelief. No. I don't want any of this. I held her hand. Helen wanted you to use this legacy for good. To rebuild the shelter. To heal what sin destroyed. She cried, but this time, not from pain, it was on purpose. So that's it. That's what it all happened for. I smiled, tired, but at peace. Yes. She wrote our pain with the ink of hope. The sound of a distant siren broke the moment again. It wasn't a police siren, it was an ambulance. Probably coming to put out the last pockets of fire. Evelyn stood up slowly, looking at the sky. She's free now. I picked up the crucifix and hung it on the car's rearview mirror, like a silent promise. Yes. But there's still something she wants me to find out. Evelyn looked at me, confused. What? I took a deep breath. The letter Helena delivered. Remember? It said there was a second part to Helen's diary, something no one has found. She frowned. What if it's somewhere she only wanted you to see? I looked at the horizon, where the clouds were timidly parting. Then I'll go looking for it, even if it takes the rest of my life. A lightning bolt streaked across the sky, and the wind carried a soft sound, almost a voice. For a moment, I swear I heard Helen whisper, "It's not over yet, my love." And at that moment, I realized that the biggest twist of all wasn't in the lies of the past, but in the truth that was yet to come. Dawn arrived silently, tinging the sky with a soft gold that seemed like a sigh from God after the storm. Smoke from the old church still rose, but now in delicate, almost peaceful wisps, as if the fire itself had surrendered to faith. Evelyn and I remained there, sitting on the hood of the car, watching the new day dawn over the wreckage of the past. There was a different kind of serenity in the air, a feeling that, however arduous the journey had been, something sacred had been accomplished. Evelyn held the crucifix between her fingers, and I realized, for the first time, that this symbol didn't just represent Helen. It represented forgiveness. "George," she said softly, "I think I understand now what she meant by 'the truth sets you free.'" I looked at her, and a tired smile escaped me. The truth hurts, but it also heals. Helen knew that before all of us. Evelyn nodded, her gaze lost in the golden light. She just wanted us to find each other. I remained silent for a while. The wind rustled the leaves, and the sound of birds began to fill the space where, hours before, there had only been shouts and gunshots. Everything seemed to be starting over. "She wanted more than this," I replied. "She wanted us to continue what she started." Evelyn looked at me, curious. "What exactly?" I pointed to the horizon. "The shelter. The place where it all began, and where she saw God in the broken people. We're going to rebuild it. But now, with her name on it." She smiled with tears in her eyes. Helen's light. I smiled back. Helen's light. We stood there for a few minutes, in silence, wondering what that name would mean to everyone who needed hope. A new shelter, born from the ashes of a tragedy, fueled by a love that not even death could extinguish. As the sun rose, I opened the diary Helena had left with me. The pages were burned at the edges, but the contents remained intact. I read aloud Helena's last words. When I leave this world, I want you to know, faith is not the absence of fear, it is choosing love even when fear screams loudest. Evelyn wiped away her tears. She always knew she wouldn't live to see this. I shook my head. She didn't need to see it. She just needed to believe. I took a handful of earth and threw it on the ground where the church had been. Here begins the new shelter. In the same place where evil tried to win. Evelyn placed the crucifix on the ground beside the earth and whispered a prayer. The sound of footsteps behind us made me turn around. It was one of the agents who had survived the night. He approached, hat in hand. "Mr. Miller, the FBI is going to close the case. But there's something you need to know." I reached out my hand, hesitant. He handed me a brown envelope. Inside, a photograph taken a few days earlier. Helen, alive, in a nursing home in rural Texas. My heart stopped for a second. "Is this a joke?" I asked, my voice almost failing. The agent shook his head. "No, sir." She was declared dead based on a charred body, but the DNA tests didn't match. Evelyn put her hands to her mouth. "Are you saying she is alive?" The agent nodded. "She lived in hiding. She left everything planned, including the shelter in her name. And she asked me to hand it over only when you were ready." At the bottom of the envelope, a letter in her handwriting. "My love, if you are reading this, it's because you fulfilled your purpose. Love doesn't die, it changes form. And ours, George, has become a light for those who still walk in darkness. Go on. And find me when God wills it." The tears came without warning. Evelyn hugged me, and for the first time in years, I felt true peace, the kind that comes when heaven and earth finally agree. We returned to the car, and as we drove towards the sunrise, the car radio, silent until then, turned on by itself. A woman's soft voice sang an old church song, "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound." I closed my eyes and let the music envelop me. The road stretched out before me, like a promise. And in that instant, I knew that Helen's love had not ended. He had simply become immortal. My dear friend, if this story touched your heart, remember, God writes straight even when the paper of life is crumpled. Forgiveness transforms suffering into a mission, and true love, the kind that comes from God, is never in vain. Helen taught us that love is never lost. It blossoms in the places where we believed everything was dead. How many times have you also felt that there was no way out, and God, silently, opened a new path? Now I ask you, have you ever forgiven someone who hurt you deeply? What if God asked you to transform this pain into something good? Would you have the courage to say yes? If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs faith. And please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This helps me continue to bring stories of hope, forgiveness, and miracles. May God's infinite love surround you and your family. May He heal what the world has wounded, and may Helen's light, that light that never fades, illuminate every step of your path. Amen.